Hi, it's Sharon Christie with Bold Women Lawyers. We're back for another live event. This is a great speaker we have today, and I know that you will enjoy listening to what she has to say. We have with us Susan Goodkind Wideman.
Wideman. Wideman
Wideman?
is
Thank
good.
you. I
Yep,
knew I would mess it up.
that's okay.
Susan is a lawyer. She is also a coach for lawyers, and the work she does with lawyers is very specific. And I'm going to let her tell us all about it. But first, I want to welcome you, Susan.
Thank you.
And it's so great to have you here. And I'm going to ask you if you could just start by telling us about your journey
Sure.
as a lawyer to where you are now and the work that you do now.
Sure. And Sharon, thanks for having me here today. This is fun to have a chance to share with you, to share with the people that listen to you. So my background is actually, if we go way back, and I've got a few years behind me, is not in law. I actually had an undergraduate degree in design, and I was practicing what's called ergonomic design for many years. And there was a point in that practice that things were changing in the design world, and I decided I was ready to try something else. So I thought I was going to go into products liability law, but once I got to law school, I found another area that really resonated with me. It was called elder law and estate planning. So helping to people to plan for the future, plan for disability, and just manage their estates and their assets. So that's the area I landed in, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. When I got out of school, I went to work for an elder law. Well, first I did a general practice for a short time. Then I went to work for an elder law and estate planning lawyer up in Marquette, Michigan, which is where I am now. I'm originally from New Jersey. We don't need to go through how all that happened. But anyway, went to work for that person and just felt we weren't quite in sync. So I went off on my own and started my own law practice. And it was so exciting. It was about building a business. It was about thinking how to market. It was thinking about how to connect with clients and engage. There was so much about it that I loved. And I loved the law too. I mean, it was very rewarding. But I tend to be a workaholic. I kind of knew that about myself. And so, like many lawyers, I just went whole hog. I mean, I was working as much as I possibly could. Um, Went in early, stayed late during that time. And, the work it allowed me to do that because not only was I trying to run the business, I was trying to be a lawyer. Um, and I had one child, and my husband was here with me, and he also was doing a job in Marquette. Um, then my husband got sick with cancer. And it was really, really, really bad. And so I spent, not only now was I, practicing law, running my office, trying to take care of my husband, and usually every few weeks running to the Mayo Clinic, which is about 9 hours away from our home, and helping him get treatment. Sometimes he'd be hospitalized and I'd be visiting. It was tough. It was a lot to handle. And I had a fabulous staff, and they really supported me through that. Unfortunately, he died. So then I was dealing with a young child because we had a young child. I was going to raise a child on my own, run the business. It was a lot. But yet my way of dealing with things in the past was work harder. If you have a problem, just work harder, lean in and work harder. And so that's what I did. I worked harder. I let a lot of things in my life go, relationships and those activities that you do that aren't work. I let a lot of that kind of stuff go. And I was very tunnel visioned, and I worked and I worked and I worked and I worked. And as my child got older and needed me less, I worked more because I had more time. Um, and then I was in a and when my husband died, I want you to know this because this was an important part of the story. I was back at work about 3 days later. I didn't take time off. I didn't process. That was something that was foreign to me. Dealing with emotions face to face was not something I did. Again, like I said, when I had problems, I worked because I guess work gave me some positive feelings.
Yeah, but you didn't even take any time to grieve.
No,
No.
truly did not grieve. I will say I knew he was going to die, so I was grieving for many months in of that part. But when him actually being alive and being deceased and then being on my own and the reality of what I had to take care of, and we had no family here. When we
Mm,
moved to this part of the country, we had so I had no one. I had lots of friends, but no family to really be there and help me out.
mm,
Anyway, I did it. I worked, I worked, I worked, and then I was in a very serious accident, um, and again, rather than taking time off to really let myself heal, I was back at work as quickly as possible and working very hard. And I can notice it slightly taking a toll on me. I had become more irritable. It was harder for me
mm,
to focus. I was very anxious, very paranoid. I mean, I was just changing as a person, and I noticed it, but I didn't really know it was a problem. Then I had a case that I made a very serious mistake on because my
mm,
focus was not good, and I put some wrong numbers in something, and I got a malpractice claim filed against me, and I lost. I had to settle. I mean, it was clearly my fault. So that
mhm,
was a huge wake-up call that, I just was even though I was working very hard, I wasn't on track. The other thing that was interesting, because sometimes when people burn out, and that's really where I was going, I was burning out,
mhm,
they stop taking care of themselves, and I wasn't. I was still taking care of myself. I'd get my hair done, I'd get my nails done. To look at me, you would not know that I was having a
mm,
problem, okay?
mhm,
I looked like I had
mhm,
my act together. I worked out 3 times a week with a trainer. I went to a meditation coach for a while. So from the outside, it looked like I had my act together and I was doing okay. From the inside, I could feel myself slipping away. I
mm.
really could. I was disconnecting. I was starting not to like my clients. And
Oh,
I had gotten quite nasty. Again, not realizing this at the time, but after the fact, my staff was not happy with me. I was snippy, I was over demanding. I went through 3 secretaries in 5 years.
wow.
Yep. And the last one, and I don't know if I'm allowed to use swear words on here, am I? Am I okay with that?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
no, I'm okay with that,
Yeah.
mhm,
The last one, the day that she came in and quit, she had this document, I don't even know how long it was, that she was prepared to read me of all my grievances against her, but when I told her I did not wanna hear it, and I thought that it was her that was the problem, not me, she said, "You are a fucking toxic bitch."
wow,
Yeah, and then I
wow,
fired her. I fired her,
wow, well,
but
good.
in hindsight, I was.
Mm,
I
mm.
thought I knew I was losing it, and then okay, so then I didn't have a secretary. So here I am going down. I could feel myself, my focus, my energy, my mood, all of it was going downhill, and I had to do my job and my secretary's job because I didn't have a secretary, and it
So
was
what
hard to
did you
find one. Okay,
yeah,
so
what did you do at that point? Yeah.
I worked harder. I worked
Okay.
harder. I went in at 7 and I went home at 11 and I got back up. And by that time, my son was, I believe, in college. So he was gone. I was truly
Okay.
alone. I wasn't, I didn't have my husband. I didn't have my son. So I just worked harder. And it finally just all came to a head. I was working on a very important case for somebody. I was calling a friend of mine in Grand Rapids who's a lawyer to help me with the case because I just couldn't, and she would say to me, "Susan, something's wrong. Something's wrong. You need to do something. Something's wrong here." So I went to my partner at that point when I had hired a young woman who was my partner, and I said, "I'm gonna take a few weeks off here. I really need to rest and to recoup." And she agreed to that. Problem was at the end of the 2 weeks, I didn't feel better, I felt worse. Because the whole time I was off, I just kept spinning about all the things that I needed to do, need to do. Long story short, went into work after I came back from that and sat down to do my work at my desk and couldn't focus. I could not figure out how to do my job. I was shuffling files back and forth on
Mhm.
my desk, and I just couldn't do my job. And I went to my partner. I said, "You need to take me to the hospital. I
Wow.
am broken. I cannot do this anymore." And long story short, I was in the hospital for a week in a psychiatric unit. I
Was that
admitted
helpful?
no.
Mm,
I
yeah,
admitted myself, and then when I realized what I'd gotten myself into, because I had
mm,
no idea what I was doing when I said I wanted to that care. When I wanted to get out, they said, "No, you must
mhm,
stay." Anyway, it was not helpful because that's not what they do in those kinds of hospitals these days. All they do is get you on medication and make sure you're not gonna kill yourself, and
yeah,
when they're
yeah,
convinced that that's what's going on, they'll let you go. When I got out, I wanted to go back to work so desperately, and yet I could not. I did get a very good therapist, and she explained to me what had happened to me, what burnout was, and what was going on. Oops, hold on one second.
yeah,
Didn't mean
that's
that to
okay.
happen. And she explained to me what was going on, and she told me it's going to take you 6 months before you are recovered from this and
Mhm.
could claim to be competent to practice law.
That must have been a real wake up to you.
I was horrified.
Yeah,
I owned a law practice.
yeah.
I was a lot of people depended on me, a lot of people needed me, and that was my whole identity. That's everything I was. But she was right. And I did so at that point, I took a few months off from work, still wasn't feeling well enough to go back, and my partner was really concerned. She didn't
Mhm.
really want me back in the office. She knew
Yeah.
I could be a liability. So we worked it out. I sold the practice to her.
Mhm.
I didn't really wanna leave, but I didn't know
Yeah.
when I would be better, and I sold the practice to her, and then I embarked on this journey of figuring out why did this happen, how did this happen, and getting well. And as I figured all of that out and I did take medication, I did see a therapist, I did, work with a coach, and I came to a really clear understanding of what had happened and why it had happened. And as I started to recover, it felt like a flower opening. I mean, I know that sounds a little
Mm,
corny, but I started to get back in touch with the Susan I had been.
yeah.
I was a creative person. I was a friendly person. I was a kind person. I was
Mhm.
a, yes, hardworking person, but there were many parts of myself I had let go of in this pursuit of law. And I'm not saying law is a bad thing. I'm saying the way I went about it was not serving me. And I think if I had known some of these things before, I probably would not have burned out.
So let me go back a little bit because you clearly had really hit a wall there, and you end up hospitalized now.
Yeah.
And now you've been through this journey to be able to sort of look back and say, wow, here were some signs. And,
Yep.
maybe, it's hard to pick up on yourself at the time. But if you were looking at somebody else, if you were looking at Susan, for example, now,
Yeah.
um, what what are some of the things that you would say were signs of burnout that other lawyers might be experiencing? And if you need to turn that off, go
Yeah, let
ahead.
me turn that
Yeah,
off. Okay.
that's fine. That's fine.
Let's see. There we go. Okay. Um, it's interesting as I look back and I can pinpoint moments of things that as I look back, I think there's a sign. There's a sign. And one of the earliest ones, I have always been a person who's very active. I love to walk, I love to run, so I would be out in the woods, but I really wouldn't be looking at where I was. Do you know what I'm saying? So I was
Yeah.
doing a lot of things on autopilot and not connecting with the world around me. And I remember my
Mhm.
husband at the time, he was alive, and he'd say to me, "Yeah, you're out in the woods, but you have no idea what's out there with you." And he wasn't saying like animals, he was saying, "You're not enjoying the experience of
Yeah.
being out in the woods." And that was how I was running my life. I was
Interesting.
doing
Yeah.
I was
Mhm.
doing a lot of the right things because I was clearly successful, but I was not really connecting with the world around me in a
Mhm.
way that was meaningful to me.
Mhm.
I didn't really when I first got out of the hospital and was working with a therapist, she said to me, "Well, let's talk about your values. What's important to you?" And I was at a loss. I was at a loss. I had no idea. What are values? What do you mean values? So,
Mhm.
I guess I valued being successful. I
Sure.
valued making
Yes.
money. I
Yeah.
valued being a mother, but I wasn't using those things as a direction for my life other than the being a lawyer. But if I valued being a mother, then I probably should have been doing things that were more aligned with
Mhm.
being a mother, spending time with my child.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
if I value and I came to discover I valued relationships. Well, if I valued relationships, then I should have been working harder to maintain connections with the people in my life and been more aware of how I was treating the people I was working with.
I wanted to ask you about that because you
Yeah.
mentioned, you became irritable and
Yes.
you were anxious and
Yes.
a bit paranoid
Yep.
and some issues with. Did anybody in the office, other than the the young woman that
Yeah.
quit? I mean, did anybody at the office come to you to say, Susan, we're seeing a change, or is something wrong, or did anybody pick up on that? And bring it to your attention. I'm sure
I
they picked up on it.
I loved my staff. I think they were way too tolerant. They just
Mm,
kept putting up with me
mm.
or quitting. I do remember one day my partner came in and we were talking about something, and she said to me, "You sure do worry a lot." And that struck me as kind of strange. I thought, "Oh, I never thought of myself that way."
Mhm.
But I must have been expressing to her somehow, "I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that, I'm worried." And I remember I used to be the person who would say, "We'll figure it out." Before all this started, like she would come to me with problems and I would say, "Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. There's always a solution. There's always a way." And somehow this had all turned around. I think, I had worn myself down. I was not sleeping. Lots of lawyers don't sleep, but
Yeah,
I really I was not sleeping. I was irritable. These are all very classic signs of burnout. I had no clue. I didn't know what burnout was. Um, Disconnected. I used to be the person. I purposely had my office in a place so in our suite so that if one of my clients came through the door, I could get up and walk out and say hi. I mean, that was the way I was. And
yeah.
I had become that person who the door became closed and there was a shade on the door. I mean, I didn't get that enjoyment out of connecting. It all was just something I had to do. Um, and I was very emotional. I
Oh,
was lots and lots of tears and upset. The focus thing was a real problem,
yeah,
a
yeah.
scary problem. You really, as a lawyer, we have an ethical duty to be in a certain mental condition when we're offering services to our clients, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and that one case was a real like I say, a very scary thing. It was if you know Medicaid law at all, it was a Medicaid application. And so
Okay.
I had transposed some numbers and I didn't catch it and nobody caught it. And it
Mhm.
caused the client to get denied benefits, which ended up in them having to pay for some of the care that they wouldn't have had to pay for.
Mhm.
It was a bad mistake.
Mistake, sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. And that's part
yeah,
of the pressure of being a lawyer. I mean, there's certain things and certain types of jobs that you can make mistakes, but they can be rectified, or the
yeah,
long-term consequences aren't that as severe. But, when you're a lawyer, that's not necessarily the case. There can be very severe long-term
correct.
consequences, and there are certain things that you do have to cross every T and dot every I, and it
Yep,
does have to be 100%
yep,
perfect,
yep.
and that's a high standard that we all have to meet.
Yeah, but you made a very good point there. As lawyers, there are times when our skills as being perfectionists and sticklers are what make us great, okay? But when we take those powers, I guess I would call them, or those skills or those strengths, and we use them in places where they're not needed, it
Mm,
becomes
mhm.
counterproductive. You know,
Yeah.
um, this is an exaggeration, but if your life is so full of the need to be perfect that your shopping list, you can't go to the store until your shopping list is perfect. Maybe you alphabetize. You know what I'm saying? I'm exaggerating, but I'm saying if you let those strengths take over where they're not needed, they can start to work against you. And I think that's what
Yeah.
happens with a lot of lawyers.
Yeah, that's a great point because we're so used to it, but it doesn't have to be that way in 100% of our lives,
Right.
and yet we can frequently carry it over. Yeah,
And
that's a
and
great
that's what
point.
leads to overwhelm, because if everything has to be perfect, if you have to be the best in everything and everything
Mhm.
has to be perfect, that's a lot to carry around with you, and then people it leads to overwhelm. This is my experience of the people that I'm working with and myself. So
Yeah,
there's this
I
feeling of
know.
overwhelm because there's so much that you have to do, and then sometimes procrastination kicks in because you're afraid to tackle things because will you be perfect enough?
Yeah, what if I make a mistake?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And that's why
yeah.
you see a lot of lawyers leaving things to the last minute. It's not and sometimes they get a little adrenaline surge out of that
Mhm,
stressor,
mhm,
but
mhm.
that is not a sustainable positive feeling. Maybe you got the brief done, you got it filed, and you feel great, but that is not going to be the kind of great that carries over from day to day to day, because you're going to go
Yeah,
right back to the next project that you have to be perfect on, and the cycle starts over again.
that's a great point. That is a
Yeah,
great point.
yeah,
So you've mentioned burnout. We all
yep,
hear burnout. It's a
yep,
big
yep,
topic of conversation in law.
yeah.
How do you define it?
I think it's a spectrum. This is the
Mm,
way I see
mhm,
it. I think it starts, many of us start that job with all these high hopes and ambitions and goals. And somehow, if we switch into that autopilot mode like I did, we find ourselves in a place where there's more demands on us than we have resources to address. And I think that's what leads to burnout. There are other factors that can go into it.
yeah,
In big law, there's a lot of things that go on in big law firms, and the competition and, and equality is an issue. There's a lot of stuff, but I think it's that feeling of this is out of control on a
mhm, mhm,
long-term basis.
mhm.
You can be floundering in your job, you can be bored in your job. These may be part of the continuum, but I think when you get to that point where it has taken a physical and mental toll on you, that's really what the burnout is.
So at that point, let's say there's some listeners
Yeah.
thinking, "Oh yeah, that's you've hit all the signs with me.
Yeah.
I'm there." What do you do? And does it mean you have to move on from being a lawyer to something else?
Absolutely not. And, you know, I'm not going to say I have regrets because I love what I'm doing right now, helping lawyers to help them not do what I did. But I think if I had known what I know now, if I had known it maybe 5 years before I left law, I'd still be practicing. I mean, that was my baby.
Yeah, yeah.
That was what I wanted to do. But no, there are many people that get into some phase on the burnout continuum and correct course and stay in law. So it's not at all a death sentence for your career in law. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you do recognize some of these feelings, some of
Yep.
the signs and symptoms that you've described,
Yep.
in your experience and the work you do now, what should be your next step?
Sure. Um, I think the part of recognizing it is super
Mhm.
hard. That is a
Yeah.
super hard thing because a lot of people that I work well, that goes with the territory, doesn't it? That's part of being a lawyer or being a doctor. Or this morning I was listening to a dentist talk about burnout. That's just what we do.
Mhm.
But you know what?
Mhm.
Maybe it's not. And if that doesn't resonate with what's important to you, you're going to fall off the rails. So the
Mhm.
first thing I think that's important is to look at what's going on in your situation and work on your self-awareness. What is important to me? What's really important to me? And am I connecting with those things in my life? So, for example, I was working with a young woman recently who told me that she loves to be outdoors. She loves to snowshoe. And yet when I said, well, so when's the last time you did that? I don't know. I haven't done that. I've kind of given that up. Or I had another lady lawyer that I was working with who loved to play piano. So how often do you play piano? I don't. Why? And, it's easy to say I don't have time.
Yeah.
But when you are working like I did, working 10-hour days with probably 4 of them being productive and the other 6 just being frantic and you do have time. You do have time, and if you let go of that part of yourself that needs to be fed, that creativity or that outdoor athletic, it's harming you. It's not helping you. In the short run, it may help you to put more time into work, but in the long run, it's part of what causes you to burn out because you're not addressing what's important to you. So first thing to do is to
Mhm.
kind of focus on what really is important to me. Is it showing up in my life? And if not, what am I willing to do to bring that into my life?
So there was something that you just said that really struck me. You're working 10-hour days, but only 4 of them are productive.
Yeah.
And to me, that's huge because I think every lawyer has been there at some point. It may not be sustained, but you realize you're walking out the door to go home. I barely got anything
Yep.
accomplished and
Yep.
move forward today.
Yep.
And yet, if I had been productive instead of 4 hours, 6 hours, I could leave at hour 7 because I got so much done and I do have the time
And I
to
wouldn't
do
have a
other
box
things.
with me when I leave the office. I mean,
Correct.
really?
Correct.
You're leaving the
Correct.
office at 10 o'clock with a box and you're
Yeah.
going back at
Yeah.
7 in the morning?
Yeah.
How's
Yeah.
that gonna work? You
Yeah.
know?
Although we used to call it, I remember there was a time when I first started, and we would all do it because
Right?
that's what was
That's what we
expected.
did.
And yeah,
Yep.
that's what we did. But we call it, I'm going to walk the files home because that's
Yeah.
about all that happened because you're
That's
so
right.
tired when you get home. It's like, I can't crack that case open. I just
Yeah.
can't do it. Yeah. Yeah.
And it really, really, if you get your mind healthy as well as your body healthy, you can be more productive.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
just a mythical thing. It's proven. I mean, scientifically, stress makes us stupid. So if we keep stressing ourselves out and stressing ourselves out, we are not making things better. We are making
Yeah.
things worse. We are making it harder for ourselves to get our jobs done and to do them well. Another thing that's really destructive is multitasking. I mean,
Mm.
that's been a trend for quite a few years now, and people sort of prided themselves on, how many balls can you hold up in the air? But again, I think scientifically it's been proven it doesn't work, at least on a long-term sustainable basis. And I
Right.
can remember seeing people, you know, well, this was my partner loved to multitask, and I could remember hearing her listening to something, watching something, and reading something. You know, these it doesn't work. It really doesn't work. Now,
Mm.
I'm not saying some nice music in the background for energy or whatever might not be a good thing, but to try to split your focus and really accomplish what you're trying to do is not effective. It doesn't work.
Mhm.
So there's
Mhm.
another thing to work on that kind of thing. I love social media as much as the next person,
Yeah.
but I think conscious, doing things knowingly and intentionally. Okay, I'm going to listen to a podcast first thing in the morning. Then I'm going to be back, saying, I'm going to control my time with social media instead of being controlled by it. So
Yeah.
I think that's another part of preventing burnout is to start to learn about how to be conscious of what you're doing and your actions.
Mm.
And then, how much time am I spending on social media? How much time am I spending with my family? How much, to instead of living in autopilot, which is absolutely the way I lived on autopilot. I was very, very structured and very routine. You could wake me up in the middle of the night and I would do the same things because that's the way I was living. But when we do that, we're not being as intentional as we have the ability to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us about how you work with lawyers now,
Yeah.
and a little bit about what you're doing.
Okay. So I spent 2 years sort of, learning about all of this, and I actually went and got trained in 2 different coaching programs about how to coach people, how to work with
Mhm.
people. And my work is what I call legal wellness, or some people call it mental fitness. Okay. There are many, many doors to go that people can choose to go through to address these things. Some people like yoga, some people like meditation, some people like cooking, some people just take a medication and that's enough. So this is just one door that I have gone through it and I'm offering it to other people. And so I work in 2 different ways, well, 3 different ways, I guess. I will work one-on-one with somebody if they want to, and I think a lot of lawyers like that. They don't necessarily feel comfortable being in front of other people talking about mental fitness issues. Okay.
Right.
So I coach one-on-one. I like to get people to commit to a period of time because it's a process. Learning to manage your mind, manage your thoughts, heighten your self-awareness. All of this is a process and it takes time, just like going to the gym.
Right.
You don't go in the first day and lift the heaviest weights. You have to learn the steps and then you have to start to develop some new
Yeah.
habits and implement. So this is what I do with people. I have an 8-week program that I can work with somebody one-on-one. I also run some groups. And I
Mm.
love that. The interesting thing about that is I generally have lawyers together who are not in the same jurisdiction. They're not going to be running
Mhm.
into each other. So they feel a little more comfortable working together. And it's interesting to watch them reinforce each other as we go through. It's like being in the gym with a group of other people. Yeah, look at you.
Mhm.
You lifted that heavy weight. Good for you. Or try adjusting your hands this way, this way. So I work with them over this period of time to learn how to develop their self awareness, to learn how to improve their mental fitness. Um, and it's a series of exercises. We really do little brain exercises, not unlike meditation. We
Mhm.
are controlling our minds. We're learning what makes me go off and get triggered. How do I see that? Stop it, calm myself down, and refocus in a way that's more productive. How do I learn not to
Sure.
be an avoider? How do I learn not to be a people pleaser? All these little things that are getting us sidetracked, we learn to
Mhm.
spot them and manage our minds and redirect in a way that is more helpful. And so that's what, so I do that in groups in an 8-week program. I'll do that with somebody individually
Mhm.
in an 8-week program. And then if somebody just has a real specific issue that they just want to work a few weeks with me or whatever, I will consider that as well. And something new that I just started doing, in fact, I'm starting next week. I put together a program for paralegals and legal assistants too,
Great idea.
because
Yeah, because it's not
well,
just the lawyers, right? It's
yeah,
not just the lawyers.
look at that lawyer who quit me at the last the legal secretary who quit me. I clearly affected her life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
doing a
that's
little bit of
great.
that. Yeah, yeah,
That's terrific. Well, I've
yeah.
put up your website,
Thank you,
goodkindoflife.com, which
thank
is
you.
great. So is that the best way for people to
Yes.
contact you? Okay,
Yeah.
terrific.
In the
Terrific.
website, you'll find all if once you get to the website, you can set up an appointment with me, you can contact me by email. There's many ways that you can reach me depending on what's comfortable for them.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
yeah.
Well, Susan, this has been wonderful. It's been,
Thank you.
really eye-opening in terms of what to look for in yourself, but also I think for many lawyers, they recognize it, but they feel like, oh, this means I have to give up law. And it doesn't. And I think that's great that you're able to get that message out too. For some people, that might be the next step. but
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be. And it sounds like you have a terrific program to help
Thank
people
you.
just work through it step by step by step,
Yep.
and then you can figure out what you get once you get through it. What's my next action? Is this good?
Exactly.
And now I know how to go back, continue being a lawyer, but handle it in a much healthier
Yes.
manner,
Yes.
or maybe there's another choice I need to
Yeah.
make. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that is an option. I just want to say 2 things. 1, having mental fitness problems is not mental illness. I know there's a stigma,
Right.
but that's not what it is. And I have seen profound changes in people that I've worked with. They are much calmer,
Mm,
much more resilient, and just they've reconnected with a part of themselves that was always there. They just kind of, for whatever reason, shut it down. And
yeah.
yeah, it's a very nice place to be when you feel mentally fit. It's in all aspects of your life, not just in your
Yeah.
law practice, in all
Yeah.
aspects of your life. Yep.
Well, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. I thank you,
Thank
Susan, for
you.
coming to talk to us
Thank
today.
you.
And for anybody that's listening or watching the replay, www.goodkindoflife.com. That's how you can get in touch with Susan. And I know she'd be happy to talk to you and see what she
Absolutely.
can do to help you.
Yep.
All right. Well, listen,
Oh,
Susan, you have a
thank
great
you.
rest of your day.
Thank you for this
And
opportunity.
oh,
Yes.
it's my
Yeah.
pleasure. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
And for everybody listening, come back next week, same day, same time, Tuesdays at 1 o'clock. And I'm going to be talking to Janet Falk, who is a communications specialist. And we're going to be talking about why did she get interviewed on TV and not me, and how you can, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
great topic, and how you can put yourself in a position to be the person that gets interviewed. So come back, and you
Love it.
don't want to
Yeah.
miss that conversation.
Awesome. Great.
All right. Well, listen,
Right.
it was great. And
Thank
thank you,
you.
everybody, for being here
Yep.
today. And we will talk to you next week.
Great. Thanks.